Oh, look out now. It's the Bourbon and Banter podcast, the biggest and most honest podcast in all of bourbon. That's right, friends and neighbors. We got everything you need to drink curious right here. So sit back, grab a pour, and check your feelings at the door, because we're here to lay it down for you as only Bourbon and Banter can. And now here come your hosts, filled with bourbon, and at this time of year, also filled with everything you'll find on your Thanksgiving table. From the turkey to the cranberries, we're stuffed with holiday goodness. Here we go.
Well, you know, Bob, I have been accused of being full of a lot of different things in my life. So stuffed, that is nothing new for me.
I'm right there with you on that one. Yes, full of many, many things. And you know, around this time of the year, not only are we full of our typical things, but we've got a little pumpkin pie, a little turkey, little cranberry, real cranberries, not none of that fucking jelly shit that comes out of the jar, you know, real cranberry sauce.
Sure.
You know, apple pies. I said pumpkin pie, sweet potato pie, you know, pecan pie. You get a whole pie thing.
Oh, yes.
You know, you actually say Thanksgiving is actually like 3 meals in one. You have your initial, you know, your little, your rolls, your side salad and stuff. Then you get the turkey and a dressing. Then you get the pies.
Oh, yes.
So
you know, my wife's
do all those things.
My wife's grandmother, it wasn't truly Thanksgiving unless the pie to people ratio was 1-to-1.
Yeah, I remember those. Yes.
You invite 20 people, you got to have 20 pies.
20 pies, that's right. So we're coming off of that, and I'm coming off of a 16-ounce box of Monster Mash cereal over the last couple of days. So the family size. You know, that's a bunch of shit, too. Talking about bullshit. We should save it for later, but I hope that they don't start it with bourbon, where you're getting the family size is now the size that the regular box used to be. You know, I don't want to, you know, wind up and we're paying the same price for a 400
And that makes no sense because we all know size-wise we're all getting bigger. So a family size should be larger if based on reality.
Technically, but surveys say, oh, it's only 100 calories per serving. But then you look at the serving size, and the serving is like half a teaspoon.
It's one marshmallow.
It's one, yeah, exactly. It's one marshmallow and one little ghost.
One little ghost. Fantastic. Well, yeah. Well, I cannot wait to sink into some turkey. You know, we don't eat turkey a lot of times through the year, but Thanksgiving comes around, I absolutely love it. And I don't know about you, but we have all the family over on Thanksgiving. We do it, you know, very traditional. And then we do that forced break, right? That Friday, we don't eat any leftovers because I just got to give myself some space. And then Saturday, we have like Thanksgiving part 2, right? And anybody who still is up, they come back over to the house, right? And we devour the second round of everything to get rid of it all.
See, most of my family is out of town, and I've had to work most Thanksgivings over the course of the last 20 years. So, you know, when everybody else is sleeping in the day after Thanksgiving, I've got to get up and put on, you know, we got to do a show, and it's every year. And they're like, oh, well, we'll make it up later. But you know something, I want to sleep in the morning after Thanksgiving. You know, but the COVID Thanksgiving, I'm just going to be cool.
You'll be cool.
You know,
all right.
We'll be fine. Yeah.
Well, if you need something to do with your leftovers, a niece of mine did this, and it actually is pretty good. You take your stuffing and your turkey and whatever else you want to do, but I usually just do it with the turkey and the stuffing, and she puts it on a waffle iron and then closes the waffle iron. And almost like paninis, you know, right? That's kind of tasty.
I've heard about
Put a little gravy,
yeah.
little gravy for dipping. It's a great way to be able to eat your Thanksgiving dinner with your hand.
Yeah. Jeez. You know, folks are going to think they tuned into the wrong podcast. This is not the Betty Crocker Bourbon and Banter podcast. This is
come on, look at
this
us.
Is the Banter
Food is pretty secondary to everything we do.
It is.
Hey,
but you know,
if it wasn't for food, we wouldn't be 1/4 the man we are today.
That's correct. Well, 1/2 the man we are today. Geez. Quarter, geez, come on. But, you know, come around this holiday time, it just reminds you that the perfect bourbon for Thanksgiving is wild turkey.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, speaking of perfect bourbons, a quick update on the Single Barrel Club. We're getting close to the end of the year. And for those of you who are in the club and wondering where things stand, we are still waiting for news on the arrival of our Old Pepper Rye pick. I just chatted with our retailer partner today, and he's still waiting to get an update on the timeline on that. as well as the update on our replacement Old Forester single barrel sample. So we're kind of at the mercy of supply chain, delivery, and things of that nature. So we don't really have a firm date on when those are coming. Unfortunately, though, we did get some definitive news regarding the Wyoming Whiskey. Apparently, even though we were trying hard to get a single barrel from this year, they sort of stopped the single barrel program really before it got started this year. And I've gotten that confirmation from both the retailer and from the brand themselves. So we are continuing to lobby them hard in order to get access to a barrel for next year. And I'm also trying to get Bob and I a trip out to visit them on site, but they're currently talking to their engineers to make sure that they can support both of us at the same time.
That is true. That is true. Yes. They have a private jet, but the load capacity that transports these barrels, we're not sure that it can handle it. So,
yeah, along with us especially. So, but if you want to check out what the Single Barrel Club is all about, you can go to the Bourbon and Banter website, go under resources, and click on Single Barrel Club, and you'll get all the information that we have available. Along with that, if you're just tuning in for the first time, we do have a members community that we have dedicated on Slack. We've gotten off of Facebook and the other social channels because, hey, we want to control our own destiny. And we've got a little over 350 members currently, and we have some slots available. So we're still reviewing some applications that have come in, so a few more people will be getting access. But if you're interested in joining a community where we have banned crotch shots and online bullies, this is the place to be. Drop us a note at podcast@bourbonbanter.com, and we'll direct you to the right place to put in an application for that. But one of the highlights of the community is the conversations that happen. It's a great group of people sharing information on, where to find bourbons, what do you recommend, things of that nature. But we also have a lot of fun in there as well. And one of the threads that came up this week in the Bullshit channel was someone posting about a topic that we've covered before, right, Bob?
Yeah, well, I saw a thing in one of the many Facebook bourbon groups that I don't frequent at all, saying that some guy said he was trying to explain to the midwife that they can't have the baby on a Saturday because Blanton's doesn't dump on that day. And I started shaking my head, and it got to a point where it's like, this is ridiculous. It's like maybe Buffalo Trace just needs to start doing something where, they can keep with high demand, because everybody's looking for these damn dump dates now, and just have it to where, you can sponsor a date. Go in with, 3 or 4 other people on a barrel, get the barrel dumped on the date that you wanted. It corresponds. And our illustrious elder, Jim Knudsen, chimed in. It's like it could be sponsor a dump date for $10,000. So you get 3 or 4 people, $10,000 a piece. They take home several cases of bottles, and they call it take a $10,000 dump. So that was the line. That was the line in the community thread this month that had me just howling. It was like, Buffalo Trace announces Blanton's taking a $10,000 dump. Perfect.
Well, it's lost on me, this whole desire to find that exact dump date and do all that kind of legwork, but more power to people who find significance in that. And, hopefully that bottle makes it to when the child reaches 21 or whatever drinking age they feel is right for their child. But, I'm totally not aboard with anything that Buffalo Trace does. It's going to make it even harder to get a bottle of whiskey. So I love the concept, but God damn it, there's another reason for you're never going to see a bottle in the wild ever again.
That's the way with 90% of the Buffalo Trace products. And I don't care anymore. I'll go drink stuff that I can find. I don't have to worry about, having some, half-assed bastard roaming around saying, ooh, look, they got the regular Buffalo Trace. I need all 7 bottles that are on the shelf.
And just to make this very clear, so there's nobody waiting today to see how we go off on this in Bourbon Bullshit, we are purposely not going to talk beyond right now any further about the whole Stag Jr. becoming just Stag and that whole marketing label bullshit. We're just going to leave that one alone. We're going to wait for the industry to die down before we tackle that one. So that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, it's Stag. Who gives a shit? You're either talking beer or bourbon. One of them you can find, the other one you can't.
However, I did send you that thing today, right? I mean, we had talked about the reason they had to not release George T. Stagg this year, right?
Correct.
So slight revision. We're going to talk about this a little bit, but we're not going to talk about the rebranding of Stagg Jr. But if you remember right, it was the last episode, I believe, we talked about the reason they aren't releasing George T. Stagg as part of the antique collection because they got in a lawsuit with Stag Leap Vineyard, right? And just to kind of add a little more credence to that so people understand is the company that actually purchased Stag Leap is now putting the vineyard up for sale. I mean, they've had it for less than a year, I think.
$1 billion.
Right. So, I mean,
but that was not announced until we broke that story.
That's right.
So I think the folks out there at Stag's Leap who are making all the money off this sale, they can thank Bourbon and Banter, the most honest team in all of bourbon.
That's right. Increasing valuations beyond just bourbon, right? And, there's a good chance we may see it become part of the Sazerac family. That would settle the trademark, right? You buy the trademark and it's all taken care of.
We are, this is Bourbon and Banter, but they have approached us. They approached me, Pops. I haven't even told you about this, but they saw the effect that we had on the sale price. And they are interested in us piloting a podcast centered on wine. But the wine crowd is a little different. So instead of Bourbon and Banter, we're thinking wine and whimpering. So that's what we're going to be headed to next.
I thought you were going to do wine and weirdos. Okay, that's better. I like your version a little bit better. All right. Well, hey, folks, if you have anything to add to that, drop us a note, podcast@bourbonandbanter.com. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the whiskey news. So, Bob, do you think the whiskey bubble is set to burst anytime soon?
Coming out of the whole pandemic thing, I'm not quite sure where we stand. Had this not happened, I think very likely it could have been on its way to bursting, because something's going to come along to take these, hack, whiskey drinking right now, but going to forget about it in 5 years, people off their trail. So. But I think that there's been some reports that it's headed that direction. Well,
the reason I asked is because there was a story that I came across in the drinksbusiness.com, and the title was, "Is the Whiskey Bubble Set to Burst?" And it basically is based around the growing trend for new and rare bottlings of one-off whiskeys have seen a really big boom in recent years, right? So these bottles are surging stratospherically and outstripping the value of older, rare vintage bottles. Now, this is primarily happening in the Scotch world, not as much in the bourbon, so you'll have to bear with us here because this often happens. Since Scotch has been bigger and more popular for a long time while bourbon was in decline, you're going to see a lot of this trend happening there first, but it's good to know about this so we can see it starting to evolve and happen inside the bourbon as well. And so what they're seeing a couple things. One is that distilleries are starting to specifically release things with targeting collectors in mind. So instead of looking at expressions that can be released for regular consumer purchase, right, and longevity in the market, they're specifically doing things that are very much targeted to the collectors, right? So limited releases of rebottlings of older vintages and modern non-age statement whiskeys packaged in luxurious one-off containers, all right? So, and what they're finding is that often these rebottlings of this older stuff will actually go for more money, even though it's the same liquid as previous releases. Or some of this younger whiskey being put into a designer bottle or pairing up with, Ferrari or someone, Aston Martin or whatnot, and doing these really cool bottles and things. They're seeing a ton of traction with that, and the value of these things being purchased is far outstripping when you could just buy the exact same liquid cheaper. So imagine if someone took Elijah Craig, right? A nice solid $30, $32 bottle in most markets, right? And were to put it in some sort of specialty container or partnered up with Mustang or something like that and release a specialty bottle, and that thing's selling for $250, right? And having limited releases and then going for a couple $1,000s in the secondary market. So we're outstripping the value and the basis of the whole production, which is the whiskey itself.
There's a sucker born every minute. And if you want to go out there and pay $200 for a $30 bottle in a special fancy, you go right the fuck ahead, because I'm going to sit there and drink the 101 or the Four Roses single barrel for, $20 to $40, and I'm going to be just fine. And one of the things though, Pops, all of us, when you started seeing all of these limited releases first hit, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, everybody was, chasing things. And now, I'm at a point, I don't give a shit. I've tasted there's so much, there's really excellent stuff you can get every day. And most of the stuff that is in these collectible bottles and these limited releases is rarely worth the money that they're putting on these bottles at $150, $200. And so I'm fine drinking off the shelf with what I can find.
Well, I mean, to put a little actual numbers against this, once again, Scotch, right? So the article specifically called out that what was it here? A Springbank, 1919, 50-year-old Scotch, which was available on the auction market for just under 40,000 pounds, was rebottled by a distillery in 1980. And one of those bottles recently sold at auction for 266,000 pounds. That's over $250,000 pounds difference in price for the same whiskey in two different glass bottles. I mean, what the fuck? I mean, this, I think we're at the point now, because we are seeing similar patterns with bourbon, right? People are collecting them like they're collecting watches, right? You don't buy it to tell time. That's a secondary value. And with people buying these bottles and these special things, they're not buying it to drink it. So, you see a lot of people who are like, I'm really into bourbon, but let's call it what it is. I think we need to start being very clear in that you are either a bourbon drinker or you are a bourbon collector. Okay. And it doesn't mean a bourbon collector can't drink some bourbon, but if all you're doing is buying it for an investment perspective, then you fall into that collector category and you need to own it, right? And you have to understand the impact that you're having on the market, and you got to put all your bitching aside. And
we're going to come and find you.
That's right.
You're not going to be a collector that much longer.
And not to pile on, but the report also makes it very clear that a lot of this is being driven, surprisingly, by the millennials. Because,
there's a fucking shocker right there, boy.
Sorry, millennials, you're guilty of another crime. And because I guess apparently the data is showing that they're having less and less interest and trust in investing in non-tangible things like the stock market, and instead want to invest in tangible things and that they can research and get the value on their own. Now, what I find sort of comical about this is that while every investment inherently has risk, including the stock market, right, has plenty of risk. The fact is that someday they're going to wake up and a lot of the stuff that they're buying is going to not have the value it once had, right? So if you're investing in whiskey just for the future potential return, you better really know what the fuck you're doing.
I'm waiting for him to wake up one day and realize how ridiculous they look in those skinny fucking jeans. That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, that is one thing you and I will never have be accused of, is wearing skinny fucking jeans.
No.
So anyway, be warned, people. And there's a great article on our website from years ago, written by Matt Self, I think it was, who talked about the whiskey bubble and compared it to the tulip bubble in Holland, back in the day, and how everybody was buying tulips and the bubble burst and fucked everything up. So lessons be learned, people. History should be read and studied so we don't repeat issues in the past. So you've been warned, and we're telling the truth because we are the most honest podcast in all of bourbon. So on a little lighter note, this one, I love this headline. William Grant worker wins 11,000 pounds for unfair dismissal after allegedly urinating on a whiskey barrel.
It's not a lighter note, it's a yellower note.
Well, I heard the guy drank a lot of water, so it was lighter as well. So apparently a distillery worker was awarded a princely sum after he was accused of relieving himself on cask and fired from his job of 31 years. So apparently this gentleman was seen near these casks when someone else then walked by and found this unidentifiable puddle of liquid, which they then took a sample of the liquid, sent it to a lab, and concluded that it was human urine. Wow. I mean, that's some dedication, right? So apparently the gentleman said that when asked why he was in the area, he denied urinating on the cask. He said he had fancied a change in scenery after his lunch break and was distracted by a robin, which had flown in between some barrels. Wilson had not previously expressed an interest in birds, which severely undermined his credibility in the eyes of the company. And there's also evidently a can of urine deodorant spray nearby as well. You can't make this shit up.
No, you can't. I thought, when I first saw the headline, I thought it was a Cleveland whiskey, but no, that was just a whiskey on the floor that they sent out and tested and came back as human piss. But,
so think about this guy's been working there for 31 years. How many casks has he pissed nearby, right? And how long until they take advantage of this? This is like that marketing stunt, right? Urine surviving or urine tainted or biologically enhanced. I mean, there's a marketing angle in here somewhere, right?
It's like, really? On the casks? There's not a restroom. There's not a gutter out back behind it. You got to do it. Well,
once again, it says it was near. I don't think he was actually going on the cask, but you know what? I wouldn't be surprised that this habit is more widespread than their Leadnard.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that just may not be barrel staining on those barrels as we're walking through the rick house that you're seeing.
Because they've got distillery cats, so I'm just saying.
That's true, and those cats will anywhere.
That's right. So. Oh, man. So anyway, next time you buy some scotch from William Grant, if you get any off notes, you might have a case for a good refund there. Just saying. Speaking of other pissy news, Diageo is building a $75 million distillery to make single malt whiskey in China. It's going to be a Chinese origin single malt. Okay. So it's going to be in the Yunnan province, and it's going to be their first Chinese origin single malt whiskey. And they said the natural surroundings and the I don't speak Chinese, but it's something like Yuan landscape will allow us to craft a world-class China origin single malt whiskey that will capture the imagination of premium whiskey lovers in China.
Capture the imagination?
Yes.
So they're going to imagine that this whiskey is worth a shit? Or what is that? What does that line even mean? Well, capture the imagination of whiskey lovers.
I mean, I don't know if I'm surprised by the news more because it's happening or more because it hasn't been done before, because, it is the largest, it's the largest alcohol market in the world, right? China. And there's nobody, whiskey is not a natural alcohol product of the country. They have other national liquors that they drink, and we've talked about those before. So this will be really interesting to see if they can pull off something that actually will appeal to the Chinese, because oftentimes drinking of imported whiskey is also part of a status symbol as well, right? You have the money, you can buy these products, and the more expensive, the better, right? That's a big part of that social, economic, cultural shift in how they think about whiskey. So will they buy into a Chinese whiskey? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, it's going to take a while for this to get built, get up, and get running. But if you're looking for another, bright spot in the future of Buffalo Trace, hey, if China buys their own whiskey, then they'll stop buying a lot of, Buffalo Trace products, right? Now, I don't know what this means for that recently announced deal with distribution of Fireball, but
true.
Can't be hard to be better than that. So we'll see what happens there and if this continues to evolve as well. And I can't wait for all the jokes to come out about the naming of the product, but we'll cover that in a future episode. On good news, the U.S. and the EU settled their tariff rift, right? So now let the bourbon flow. Get rid of those tariffs that was limiting the import and export of America's native spirits, so to speak. So that's good news for everyone, except the people that were hoping that would allow more product to hit the U.S. markets, right? So don't expect any relief on the allocation issues that many brands have, because now they can start shipping it overseas again and continue to expand in those markets. So hopefully some of those profits will find their way back and get some stuff into our shelves, but we'll see how that goes in the near future.
The place that's really going to help is craft distilleries. A lot of them had undergone larger expansions, and then everything shut down and tariffs hit, and it hit them harder than it's going to hit the big distilleries. So, hopefully some of them that had been really building up a strong export business can can get back to that, and hopefully it didn't hurt him too bad. But
no, absolutely. That's a great point. I mean, for those that had, recently cracked those markets, being able to return to that, right, who had scaled up for it, that'll be welcome news for them as well. And that will hopefully allow them to invest and continue to grow their distilleries as well. All right, so let's talk about a few new whiskey releases that are coming out as well. Big one that hit my bullshit radar was Brad Paisley to launch American Highway Bourbon. Now, I think Brad Paisley is a decent guy, great musician, but apparently this American Highway Bourbon is a whiskey aged in barrels stored in a 53-foot semi-trailer that followed his 2019 nationwide tour for 7,314 miles across 25 states from coast to coast.
So who gets the tax money for aging that product? Does a little bit go to every state in the 25 states? I mean, that's what I'm wondering right now.
Really, that's what you're wondering.
That's what I'm wondering. Right? That's what I'm wondering. Where's the tax revenue on that? Does DOT get part of that?
Well, I would suspect.
No,
I
saw this. I'm like, this is fucking horse shit.
Yeah. Well, he apparently partnered with Bardstown Bourbon Company for this project.
Imagine that.
And they created a custom whiskey. Evidently, Brad was very, very involved. They said, you don't get many celebrities that have such a technical palate. It was a super collaboration that resulted in traveled bourbon in an exemplary expression, which once again means nothing. But it's described as a blend of 4 rye-forward bourbons ranging in age from 3 to 15 years. The flavor profile is incredibly unique, subtle, complex, spicy, well-traveled, and as we like to say, it was born in Kentucky, aged across America. Now, I just want to back up here for a second and say that it was aged in a single year. Okay, so let's just break this down for a second, all right? These were 3 to 15-year-old barrels of bourbon, okay, that were then blended at the end of the day. Or actually, it doesn't say if they were blended first or not. So it wasn't aged in America. It was jostled and mishandled across America, to be very, very precise, okay? It's going to be 96 proof, and it's got 28% of it is 3-year-old whiskey. All right, 25%, another 25% is another 3-year-old. So right now we're up to 53% 3-year-old whiskey. All right, 24% is 13-year-old, and 23% is 15-year-old. And this is going to cost you $99 per bottle. For a whiskey that a little over half of it hasn't even reached the minimum 4 years for not having to put a label on the bottle.
Bullshit.
So think about this for a second. If this whiskey has 3-year-old whiskey in it, 3-year-old bourbon in it, and has older bourbon, where does this fall in from a labeling perspective? That's a good question because, right, if a bourbon is less than 3 years old, it has to be stated on the bottle, or less than 4 years old, you have to put an age statement on the bottle, but this is a blend. So I wonder what the label will look like on this. I'm really kind of curious around that technical question. But anyway, guys, take it for what it's worth. The traveling on the bus, bullshit. We all have talked about sonic aging. We've talked about aging on a barge. We've talking about aging with guitar speakers in front of it. And if the bourbon wasn't solid and great to start with, none of that's going to make a difference. So just remember, you're paying a lot of money for a celebrity endorsement of a whiskey that, quite frankly, is probably not going to be anything much different than the things you can already get in the market today. So there you go. Bob, any parting thoughts on that one?
I just said bullshit, and I think that's where I'm at.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's talk about something that's not bullshit. Let's talk about that Jack Daniel's new single barrel release this year of their Coy Hill High Proof. What you say about that one?
I say, and I said this in the review, is that if you find a bottle of this and don't buy it, I'm coming to your house and we're going to have a talk. So I have been a fan of Jack Daniel's barrel proof whiskey for several years. And I will admit it took me a couple years to actually break down and buy a bottle of just the standard barrel proof expression. And once I did, I was like, well, why the hell did I sit there and hem and haw over it for 2 years to figure out whether or not I wanted to do it? But it's this one is like last year. They did the barrel proof rye as a limited release last year. It was fantastic. This is equally fantabulous. It is the highest whiskey that Jack Daniel's has ever put in a bottle. They're ranging from 137.4 to 148.3. It's coming from the highest hill on the distillery grounds, from the Buzzard's Nest and those high tiers of the warehouse, the rick houses on Coy Hill. So this is something that is absolutely fantastic. Pops and I had an opportunity to taste this last week and be on a call with Chris Fletcher and several other whiskey writers. Chris, the master distiller for Jack Daniel's, and I'm certainly a fan. I think Pops was impressed as well.
I think this is absolutely delicious. And, the sample that you and I both got was the 148.3. And first of all, does not drink that hot. I mean, it drinks hot. Don't get me wrong, but not 148.3. But it's delicious. It's a totally different flavor profile from your standard Jack Daniel's, right? And I'm just huge fan of it, and we'll be trying to pull out the stops to get a bottle, which is going to be really hard to get, unfortunately. But what I thought was really cool was the fact that they have about 35 barrels that they did not bottle because the proofs in those go up to 159. And the current Jack Daniel's bottle isn't designed to be able to have alcohol that's high proof. So when you buy a bottle, right, there's always space in the neck between the fill level and the cap. And apparently with that higher proof whiskey, if it goes into that bottle with that amount of space, the corks will push out and the bottles will leak. So they have to figure out, if they want to release that whiskey, how are they going to do it to do that, right? They can't.
It's
and
the
thing
vapors.
Is,
it's the vapors that are in between there. And because the single barrel bottles are those shorter squat bottles, they don't have as much room.
Right. And you can't just simply put less liquid in because the bottles are and the labels are all registered for 750 milliliters. Right. So there's a whole labeling and TTB registration. So we're hopeful that they will come up with a solution and put those out. Once again, going to be really hard to find if they do that, but keep an eye out for that because they're pretty excited by those barrels. And I guarantee you they've been tanked, so they're preserved. It'll be really kind of fun to see those released. But if you can get a bottle of this, definitely put it on your list. You will not be disappointed whatsoever. And if you are, simply let us know at podcast@bourbonbanter.com. And we'll gladly buy it from you at prorated retail, whatever's left in the bottle. We'll take care of you. We'll make you whole.
Yeah, please let us know because and Pops is right. The thing I was most surprised about was how much different this was on the palate to the standard single barrel expression, which I've had up to I think 133 proof. And that chocolate covered banana caramel that I get from the regular Jack single barrel is different on this release. It's more of a cinnamon cherry candy type of thing happening. So it is and it's 9 years. It's not age statement, but Chris confirmed that it is 9 years old. It was barreled in 2012 and bottled late summer of this year. So
yeah, and if your child was born in 2012, this is a much better choice than a bottle of blends. Just saying.
That's very true.
You'll be a lot happier with this. All right, two other quick release announcements here. One is Castle & Key is releasing a series of restoration rye single barrels. This is going to be released every Thursday and Sunday now through December 12th, except for the week of Thanksgiving. These will be available at the distillery for $64.99. They've got two labels for these single barrels, black and gold. The black labels were picked and identified as single barrel releases by the Castle & Key team and will be sold at the Boiler Room on site. And Restoration Rye Single Barrel Gold labels were selected by retailers, restaurants, and enthusiast groups throughout key markets where Castle & Key products are sold. So head over to the Castle & Key website to see the schedule of sale and what's available. These things may already be all spoken for, but once again, people have to show up and buy them. So you want to stay close if you're interested. If you can't get a spot right now, keep checking in. You never know what may happen. And then our friends over at Law's Whiskey House announces the release of a new cognac finished bourbon, where they've taken a Solera process to create a very unique bourbon release. Laws is based out in Denver, Colorado. Been a big fan of the whiskeys they've been putting out for a while. And this was a series that was introduced back in 2017, which was called their Special Finish Series. And this new cognac finished bourbon has been aged for more than 4 years, and it's going to be released, this month, and it's going to be $79.99. So if you are a fan of finished bourbons and are curious of what cognac brings to a bourbon, check them out, especially through that Solera process. So as new releases are put out from that process, you can see how the different aging affects that. So head on over to the Laws Whiskey's website and you can learn more about this interesting release. And that brings us to, a story, Bob, that you've put forth about a new whiskey that's going to be coming out actually next year, right?
Yeah. So in our crackpot team of investigators continues to come through for us, and in keeping with the recent trend of pairing food with whiskey for exclusive bottlings, like you've seen the stuff from Tamworth, all the ridiculous shit that they've been doing, and the Cleveland BBC cornucopia release last year that we broke, as well as the Jefferson's Ocean Spray Voyage. So food and bourbon, big things. And word leaked to us that Michter's is experimenting with a new concept that's going to bring together two of Kentucky's most prized exports, bourbon and country ham. And as we've all learned from our Bourbon and Banter's very own Steve Coombs, country ham and bourbon are ideal partners in whiskey and food pairings because the fat and the ham, when combined with the whiskey, leads to a magical taste experience. And the folks at Michter's are taking that one step further. So they consulted with Coombs and several members of the Country Ham Trail.
What?
And there's a Country Ham Trail. We
No
got to do
shit.
that.
Oh man,
I didn't even realize it. No,
Coombs has been holding out on us.
Yeah, he has been. Steve's been holding out on us on that. Yes, Michter's master distiller Dan McKee started experimenting with aging bourbon in country ham warehouses to see what the essence of the ham would impart on a whiskey. Initially, they started with 5 barrels full of matured Michter's US 1 bourbon. They were moved to the country ham warehouses for an additional 3 months of aging. The results yielded a very salty, smoky palate on the whiskey, but the nose was apparently very adversely affected, giving off a strong hint of spoiled meat.
Not good.
So I guess botulism bourbon doesn't really roll off the tongue too well.
No. Don't give that to the marketing team. Absolutely not.
No. So they knew a change was needed, and McKee consulted with Master Distiller Emeritus Pam Heilman and revamped the experiments and just took the standard bourbon again, but this time used a traditional rickhouse, didn't even bother with the ham warehouse, and aged the barrels with a country ham stave in it for 6 additional weeks. So this in-barrel finishing technique resulted in a more pronounced saltiness and smokiness on a palate and a thick, silky mouthfeel similar to non-chill filtered bourbon, which we can think is attributed to the ham's fat content. And then there was no spoiled meat note on the nose. It got rid of that. And I can see Pops is looking at me insanely. He's like, what the hell is a country ham steak?
Yeah. Come on. What the fuck is that? So
large hams were sliced into 3-foot-long 1x4 pieces. Then they're put in the middle of the barrel, just like the makers mark 46 French oak staves in their private selections, where they do the 6 staves in the middle. So they take 4 pieces of this country ham like that. The country ham staves inserted, and after aging for an additional 6 weeks, the ham staves are then removed and dried for an extra month to create an accompaniment for the new expression that is the ultimate in country ham goodness. So just think about that. Think about a mature country ham, then is in a bourbon barrel for 6 weeks, and then is dried again and aged. I can't imagine how good that's going to be.
It's like country ham inception.
Yeah, it's amazing. So the distillery had hoped to release this new expression this fall, but as you mentioned, don't give botulism to the marketing team. Well, you got to be careful with this one because intense marketing and product design, they're going to avoid any confusion whatsoever with other products that might be on the market, like Whistle Pig. There are differences with the two distilleries.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Mainly Michter's being one that is respected and products people actually want. But, imaging is a concern for the team, so they don't want to be confused with the mediocrity from Vermont, So now, knowing Michter's reputation for doing everything top-notch, we would not be surprised at all to see them roll this release out with a series of country ham whiskey tasting events across the country featuring our very own Steve Coombs. Coombs, for those of you who don't know, is an avid Winnebago enthusiast. So he very likely could be prodded by Michter's to just take it on the road, in the Winnebago. The Hamabago, maybe that's what it'll be.
There you go.
But
Steve literally wrote the book on country ham.
Exactly.
This is fantastic because he has been doing that ham and whiskey pairing with them for years, and I don't think, Bob, you've had the honor yet of attending one of those, but it's freaking fantastic. The way that
I haven't, and seeing the way that he describes it, and I would never have, when I first heard about him doing it, I'm like, this can't really country ham. But then he described what the whiskey does to the fat, and it just really just melds that all together. It does sound fantastic. So I was not as surprised as one would think when I heard about this. But I have not talked to Coombs yet because, like I said, we just got this in breaking news right here.
The follow will be fantastic. And there was a couple. Willett for a while was taking country hams and hanging them in their rick houses, right? Trying to get the barrel influence into the ham, and they had an issue with mold growing on the hams, and it didn't really work the way they had hoped it would. So this is, holy shit! This is right out of fiction almost, right? In the fact that we've talked about people creating these food-based whiskeys, and with Cleveland and Jefferson's and whatnot. So this is going to be very cool to see how this works. And what I find fascinating when you talked about the mouthfeel in this whiskey is Michter's is one of the distilleries that they filter everything, right? So they don't offer a non-chilled filtered product, right? So to have something that's going to have that mouthfeel despite their filtering approach, that's going to take it to a whole nother level. So I can't wait to get a sample of this, and I really hope that I can mooch a seat at one of these rollout events if they get Steve to do these with the actual ham pairing. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, they've been working on this for a bit because they have to age it in the rick house in winter months because it's got to be below 40 degrees or you get the issue like you do with the country ham with mold growing on it.
Yeah.
So it was more of a chilled aging type when they actually inserted the ham stave. So there's a lot to really look into on this, and I'm very excited to see what this tastes like. I'm hoping I get an opportunity.
Well, excellent work once again, Bob, and make sure you pay the team appropriately for this behind the scenes access to some of these information. It does make our podcast the most honest podcast in all of bourbon. And hey, folks, if you have a news story for us to chase down or a tip, something going on that you think we should dig into, drop us a note at podcast@bourbonbanter.com. Hey, folks, Pops here. I hope you guys are enjoying this podcast, but I want to take a quick minute and give a shout out to our sponsors, KO Distilling out of Manassas, Virginia. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while or reading some of our most recent reviews, you know that we recently had a trip out to see them at the distillery, and we had an absolute blast out there meeting the team there. Bill Carlson and John O'Mara founded KO Distilling just about 6 years ago. We were actually out there for their 6th anniversary celebration, and they are doing a hell of a job. They've got a great team who they've empowered to really take their vision of whiskey and put it into action. And they're also doing a lot for their local community. But as lifelong friends, Bill and John have created a great environment. They've got some great products, including their own bottled and bond products. And they just released a 6-year-old source whiskey that they've been sitting on. I mean, how many distilleries do you know that wait 6 years before they release the source stuff? And I'll tell you what, it's like nothing you've ever had before. Even if you've had source whiskey from this distillery, it's never tasted like this. So it's definitely one to add to your bucket list. And if you can't get out there in person, check out their virtual tour online. and buy their products online. But if you can get out there, tell them that Bourbon and Banter sent you, you'll have a great time. We guarantee it. So visit them online at kodistilling.com and drop us a note and let us know what you think. All right, folks, it's time for the Craft Shoot. That's right, the galaxy's first and only podcast segment that can actually make a distiller cry. That's right, folks, we're going to try a whiskey that's been sent to us, and we're going to do it in a blind setting, meaning that neither Bob nor I actually know the whiskey that's in our glass. Only after we've sampled it and given you our opinions will we unveil what it is. So, with that being the case, let's go ahead and dive right in. So, Bob, what are you getting on the nose?
I'm getting a little mustiness, little musty, closet type of thing happening here. But it's not entirely unpleasant. So I don't get that strong ethanol like I typically get off of a craft whiskey because it's very young. So
right. All right. So I don't get the mustiness. What I do get though is, the sweetness is faint, and I'm actually picking up a little bit of mintiness. It's almost like rye. I mean,
yeah, I can see that. I get a little herb. It's a little.
I mean,
herbal.
on the nose, this could be a rye. Smells thin, if you know what I mean, right? There's not it's not super rich.
Yeah,
it's a little
not very deep. No,
not very deep. All right, let's go ahead and dive in taste wise. It's a little different.
I'm inclined to agree with you on the rye whiskey.
I'm not getting any of the young craft notes, right? Nothing that says it needs to be in the barrel, long enough just to be drinkable. So that's not there. But the flavor's not really complex either, right? So it's not old.
It's a very unassuming.
4 to 5 years, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
A little bit of vanilla, not super strong, but definitely more of that rye note coming through. A little grassy, a little minty. Interesting.
A little bit of menthol.
Nothing offensive, but not hitting my palate where I'd be like, "Oh, give me more and more and more." But I would drink this. Somebody gave it to me, but it would not be something that I would qualify as really complex.
Not something I'm going to go grab, but it's we've had a lot worse on a craft shoot.
Absolutely. Finish wise, some rye spice. A little bit of oak, a little bit of tingle in the tongue. Say a medium finish. But what's interesting is just on my glass, it did have really nice legs on the glass, which was surprising.
Yeah, I'm seeing that myself.
All right, well, let's figure out what this one is.
The envelope, please.
All right, this whiskey is Huling, if I'm pronouncing that right, Huling Station, a very small batch. Straight bourbon whiskey, and this is from Old Dominick Distillery. And I'm looking at the bottle here. It says it's 52% corn. Well, that's interesting. 44% rye and 4% malted barley. Look at the bottle. Okay, well, hold on here. Distilled in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, for Old Dominick Distillery.
This is MGP. If it's Old Dominick, it's MGP.
So it's MGP, but this is not a standard recipe.
No, they may. Well, MGP will distill whatever you want them to.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So hold on. Let me pull up the website for this. All right. So this is 100 proof, 4-year-old, barrel char level 4. Yeah. So this is a bespoke mash bill for Old Dominick. All right. Interesting. Well, that explains, the fact that we're not getting any of the young barrel character. We're not getting those off notes that you can often get from a young craft distillery, right? Because it's MGP. So they got the distilling basics down. And then the fact that we're getting a lot of rye, explained by the 44% rye, but it's not a rye whiskey. It's still a bourbon, right? It still qualifies as a bourbon. But the 4 years old, I think, is also, we're just, when you get the 4 years old, you're just entering the territory where you're going to start picking up the vanilla notes out of the barrel. And I think this one could have used a couple more years to really kind of bring it out. Now, what's interesting is I'm looking at the label here. Yeah, so, a lot of people are going to wonder why this is not a bottled in bond, right? So, because 4 years, it's 100 proof. But we don't know the provenance of the barrels that were blended for this. Were they all from one season or not? And quite frankly, it's unclear from their website if these were aged somewhere else from where they were distilled. So anyway, hey, not a bad start. Old Dominic is out of Memphis, Tennessee. They've got quite a few other whiskeys available as well. And I do believe we've got some other stuff from them in the lineup somewhere in the craft shoot. So we'll probably come across those on future episodes as well. But it's a nice start for them. A little more age would make it a little bit more different. But what I do like about it is it's not a stock mash bill from MGP. They've created one that speaks specifically to what they're looking in a whiskey. So I'll be excited to see how this one continues to age for them, and how that changes the profile as it gets a little bit older.
And it's about $35-$40 a bottle, because I tasted this once before in a store. Tasting,
Did you?
You know, little plastic. I mean, it's been years, so I wasn't. I walked away. It's like, I didn't think much, but
right. Yeah, it's not super exciting, but it's not bad. It's a good start. You're right. I'm looking at the seal boxes. They've got it, listed as 38, and coming soon. They're out of it right now. So, once again, this would be one that we would say try at a bar, right? It's not a bad whiskey, but not super exciting as well. Just kind of solid middle ground, and definitely one to keep an eye on if they are going to release it at older age statements as the whiskey continues to age. So, all right. So if you have a whiskey you think should be in the craft shoot, drop us a note, podcast@bourbonbanter.com. We're always open to accepting things for that, and we will put them through the test. All right, folks, it's time for the only podcast segment officially broadcast on satellites throughout the known galaxy and beyond. That's right, folks. It's time for Bourbon Bullshit.
Bourbon Bullshit.
All right, Bob, I got one that's really pissing me off this week, and that is this proliferation, if you will, recently of articles, posts, stories coming in of writers and people who think they know a lot about bourbon, just putting out a epic amount of misinformation. For example, one of our folks put a little snippet into our Slack community about bourbon, and just posting some stuff, and just the huge amount of inaccuracies and lack of clarifications was appalling. And then that was followed up by someone talking about a guy who introduced themselves at a whiskey tasting as a whiskey connoisseur, and then asked them if they were going to be pouring bourbon or whiskey, and then added in that that bourbon had to be made in Kentucky. Now, classy move by the person who was leading the tasting, because they said, I didn't correct you because I want to keep you from embarrassing yourself. Now, I have a belief that if you want to read and be knowledgeable about bourbon or about whiskey, you should avoid anything published in a publication that has nothing to do with bourbon, unless it's written by someone who has a regular beat on the whiskey world.
That makes sense. Yeah, if it's a guest columnist who knows what the hell they're talking about. But, if you're picking up something while you're standing there waiting to check out with your Ben & Jerry's and your, Entenmann's Donuts, and you've got a magazine there at the checkout aisle that's got, top bourbons this year, you don't want to fucking look at that.
Yeah. And, you see these all the time, from articles that are written with these new emerging content AI artificial intelligence engines, right? We can type in a topic and it creates these articles automatically, which just proliferates the bad stuff, right? Because it grabs content that's popular and then melds it together in a new gibberish pattern known as English. And then people post these out there. And, once again, you would think that these publications would do some fact checking, right? Say, hey, you know something about whiskey. Would you mind reading this? Make sure I didn't screw something up. And, I know mistakes happen, but come on. The shit that's going out there is getting ridiculous. In fact, I'll tell you what, there was a post that just came out. It's being forwarded and shared across all the whiskey channels right now about things you didn't know about blends. Okay. Everyone's, favorite, whiskey to try to get a bottle of outside of Pappy. And a lot of it in the thing was actually better than I anticipated. But they talked about how Blanton's was a flop in the U.S. market when it was launched. And the one thing that they didn't get to explicitly is the fact that Blanton's was actually created for the Japanese market. So the article says it was a flop in the U.S., but thankfully the Japanese loved it. Well, that's because it's who it was created for. And I don't know if they were talking to the Buffalo Trace PR folks, and they, if pressed about the story, they'll admit it, but they definitely don't like to promote the fact that the only reason that product exists is because the Japanese company who owns every brand made from mash bill number 2 wanted it to be created for that market.
And I don't know how many people even know that.
Well,
that every brand under mash bill number 2 is owned by a Japanese market.
That's right. So there you go, folks.
That's why all the Blanton's varieties have been overseas long before they would make it over here, aside from the single barrel.
That's right. And we owe so much to the Japanese market as bourbon drinkers because they helped keep it afloat when we got stupid and weren't drinking it, right? But, obviously Buffalo Trace and Sazerac, I can understand why they don't want to really promote it because they get all the credit for distilling it. But yeah, the other company owns the mash bill. They own Blanton's that gets put out, Rock Hill Farms, and others under that mash bill. And we really owe a huge debt to them for basically having, Elmer T. Lee craft that product for the Japanese market. And obviously we're benefiting from that now that everyone in the U.S. market has come to say, hey, single barrels are really great. The other thing the article talked about was that it created the single barrel. And I think just a little clarification to make me feel a little bit better is that Blanton's was absolutely the first commercially available single barrel, right? The first one that was specifically made and was commercially available. But plenty of distilleries would create single barrels and give them out as gifts, right? It was like the special thing that they would give out to the friends and dignitaries and things of that nature. Because you can go out and find dusty vintage bourbons that were single barrels that put out. So the concept existed, but it is accurate in that that was not something that was regularly commercially available as well, which I think is fascinating that they would do this for true bourbon lovers, but no one had thought the market could bear. And once again, the U.S. market couldn't bear that, right? Once again, released in Japan. And then as the upswing came back, people fell in love with it. So once again, just clarification a little bit. So my whole thing around bullshit is be careful what you read, folks, because you may not be getting the full story. So as with any news story, right? Read it. Read another article, start comparing notes, and make sure you get a good foundation. And if you ever have a question, let us know. Join our Slack community. We'll be glad to help add some further clarification to that as well.
You can also look on bourbonbanter.com because we are the most honest team in all of bourbon, and everything we say is true. So you can find whatever you need to find right there on Bourbon. If you're wondering if something's true, look it up on Bourbon and Banter. See what we say about it. If we say it's true, you better believe it's true. I'm still amazed that people think the bourbon has to come from Kentucky. Because that's just not writers, that's wait staff in restaurants, bartenders even. Branford Marsalis told me he was in Iowa doing a gig, and he went and the bartender was giving him this Iowa bourbon, but he said it can't really be called bourbon because it's not from Kentucky. And I just started shaking my head. And I said, Branford, man, would you educate these people, please?
It's like
he says, man, that's what the cat was telling me.
I did a tasting the other night, and the guy said he only drinks sour mash. And I said, well, thank God just about the majority of bourbons are sour mash. He's like, no, they're not. And we had to calm the gentleman down before the tasting began. But anyway, hey, you know what? I would love to hear what people are hearing themselves. So if you constantly hear some misconceptions about bourbon that you know that are wrong, drop us a note at podcast@bourbonbanter.com. Let us know what some of the common misconceptions are, and maybe we'll tackle those in another episode and get a little bit more into detail of that. We'd love to hear what you're hearing and help set the record straight out in the bourbon drinking world, because we get a lot of newbies coming into the category, which I think is fantastic, but let's set them up for success long-term by giving them the facts as soon as possible. Now, Bob, the holidays are coming up, and I know personally for you, this is a very frustrating, stressful time because everyone's putting out their bourbon and whiskey gift guides for the year. And, we've done these in the past, and I think ours have been really well rooted in really practical gifts for people. But there's a lot of shit that's out there that clearly falls in a little bit into this category of writers that don't know anything. So I thought it would be really fun to take a different tack to this. Are you open for my idea here? I'll walk you through it, but I know this is a hot issue for you.
I am open to your idea.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're doing this live, people. This has not been pre-planned, so I have no idea what Bob's going to say. So this could go off the rails quicker than usual. But what I'm going to do is we're going to take 5 categories of bourbon drinkers. And we're going to ask Bob to say what you should absolutely avoid for this person, and instead what you should consider giving them for a holiday gift this year. So if you're looking to buy something for someone in one of these categories, here's your go-to list. And if you are in one of these categories, maybe you'll give an idea to pass along to the loved ones in your life who want to give you something for the holidays. So, all right, Bob, you ready? You strapped in? Fully loaded?
Yes,
your glass full? You ready to go?
Let's see what we got. You're soliciting opinion.
That's right.
I just want to remind you.
That's right. And you edit this thing, so who knows what's going to hit the final episode. So let's start out with the bourbon newbie. Things to avoid and things to gift.
For the bourbon newbie, avoid barrel strength bourbons. If somebody's just starting it, you don't go off and buy them 120 proof Knob Creek single barrel. No, do not do that. For the bourbon newbie, I am a big fan of blind tastings, and especially if you're an experienced bourbon drinker. I guess that would be, if you're an experienced bourbon drinker, you're buying for somebody who just wants to get into it. Why not craft them a blind tasting kit and craft 2 of them, and then you guide them through the blind tasting and take them through some 80 proof up to 90 proof and maybe finish at 100 proof, but I wouldn't go above that, so that they can just taste the differences, maybe use different mash bills, do a wheated, do a high rye, do a standard rye mash bill, and just let them guide them through that. Maybe throw in a few things that can accent it, maybe some nuts, some dried fruit, some chocolate, some country ham like we mentioned before, but something that you could take them, and so they go from, okay, maybe I kind of like bourbon, to, wow, well, when I taste it this way, I'm realizing that, and then they have no idea what they're drinking, so they can't have any preconceived notions about it.
I love the idea. I love the thoughtfulness of it. And might I add, if you want to put these kits together, right, you go online, order some Boston round bottles from Amazon, label them 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you want to do. And may I suggest you visit shop.bourbonbanter.com and check out our tasting mat templates that you could then download and send them the templates actually for tasting mats to go with it as well. I mean, that's a wonderful idea, Bob. You are really thoughtful.
And
you're a nice guy. Those
tasting mats, not just, it's a very, very useful gift for that. And when you're doing these blind tasting bottles, be sure to write down what you put in each bottle. Don't just write 1, 2, 3, 4 and then forget.
Well, no,
I had somebody give me 4 bottles of E.H. Taylor, but then they forgot what they put in each bottle and they didn't have it listed. So I was like, well, what's in what?
Amateur. Well, label it 1, 2, 3, 4 for them, but write it down for you, so when you do the tasting, you can remember.
That's what I'm saying.
All right. So that's the newbie. Good. And I'll throw in there on this as well as resist all urge, whether it's a newbie or anyone. Do not give anybody whiskey stones unless it's an ex that you're trying to injure. All right, just whiskey stones are bad. I don't care who you are. Don't give them. Full stop.
Or it's a neighbor whose window you want to break, and you can give it to him. There you go.
All right. So what about the cheap drinker? The person who doesn't really like anything expensive and respect the bottom shelf is their mantra.
So for those folks, this is the handle of Evan Williams for $16.99 or $19.99 or whatever they want. You can still respect the bottom shelf, but I would go for go for Evan Williams bottled bond, go for Old Granddad bonded, both under $20, both infinitely better than their 80 proof counterparts, and both stuff that you're going to be able to find, that you're not going to have a hard time finding. But again, I like to give it to them blind. So, when you gift them, give them a glass. Say, hey, try this. And they may think, oh, wow, that's what. And then you find out, hey, it's only $20 or less. There's a lot of stuff. Now, we have mentioned before, if you're in Kentucky and you can get JTS Brown bottle and bond for $12 a bottle, hey, there's some,
Well,
if you're looking at a bonded whiskey, 4 years, 100 proof minimum, you're going to find some. Especially if you live in a state that produces the majority of this stuff, you're going to find some stuff that you can get cheap. Well, so it's for folks who are drinking that 80 proof, really cheap bourbon, that's what they've always had. That's what their parents had drank, and they knock it up a little bit. Find them a 100 proof bottle that is very reasonable, and I think they'll be very happy.
I want to build on your JTS Brown, because that's my house bourbon. I always keep a case of it around. I was going to say, if you've got someone that you want to spend a little bit more on, but they still fall in that category, get yourself to a state that has it. Buy them a case, right? You can get a 12 bottle case in Kentucky for about $110, and then throw in a DVD copy of The Hustler with Paul Newman, because that's the movie where his character is drinking the JTS Brown. So you're giving a whiskey to stock their bar. You're throwing in the cool factor with the movie. And then you can sit down and have a good time and enjoy some bourbon while watching a classic movie as well. So, who's going to be upset with that? Can you imagine how cool would it be to somebody walks in with a case of bourbon wrapped? That's cool. I don't care how cheap the stuff is. That's pretty awesome to open up.
That's right. And something, and you can do a variety of those things for either one of the newbie or the cheap. You can buy a bunch of different bottles that are at that price point.
That's right.
And go, very old Barton, 100 proof.
Absolutely.
That's $15.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can get, there's so much you can do for under $20. You don't have to spend a lot. And even if they're a seasoned bourbon drinker, they're going to appreciate those bottles.
Very true. All right. Well, what about the seasoned drinker? Someone who's seen it all, drank it all, and it can be a little hard to buy for.
Well, for folks like that, depending upon what your price point is, I like to go for something that is tried and true, but that maybe they haven't grabbed. And within the last few years, my go-to for that has been Remus Repeal Reserve. The Remus Repeal Reserve bottlings have been really fantastic, and you can usually find them. Up until recently, you could find several different years of them. They were still sitting on the shelf. So that averages around $80 a bottle. If you have to do less than that, you're never there. There are some tried and true things that every seasoned drinker is going to love, like Wild Turkey Rare Breed, but maybe they don't want to do barrel proof. Maybe they're a seasoned drinker, but they're not drinking 120, 130 proof barrels. You can do Wild Turkey Rare Breed. You can do Four Roses single barrel. You can do basic things like Knob Creek. There are some very simple things. Or if you still have that, the other thing that I enjoy are the Maker's Mark private select bottles are great for seasoned drinkers. And there are so many different ones of those out there. Also with seasoned drinkers, I recommend looking at store picks, because that's something that's unique to that one specific barrel. Wherever you're at, most of you who are listening to this are going to have a local store that is going to have a few different store picks. And that's always something that decent store picks of decent whiskey,
So those are
store picks of Jefferson's Ocean. Just leave that on the ocean.
Well, that leads me to my question. So those are all great recommendations. So what would you avoid getting the seasoned drinker? I mean, this could be a type of bourbon. There could be some other sort of gear-based thing. Is there things specifically for the seasoned drinker that you'll get laughed out of the house if you give?
Yeah, anything that says orphan barrel around the neck of it, probably don't even bother with the seasoned drinker. Oh, that's such a cool-looking bottle, and it's expensive. That'll be great to give to them. Don't do it. Also, don't give the seasoned drinker Blanton's if you find one. Don't go out, that's not, no. There's a lot of better stuff you can do for that. You mentioned Whiskey Stones already. Seasoned drinkers, I would avoid giving them any kind of glass that's not a Glencairn.
Gotcha.
Unless they're cocktail drinkers. But if you're going to, these glasses they're so pretty. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Just take that money you were going to waste on a glass and put it in a bottle.
Oh, there you go.
Because if they're a seasoned whiskey drinker, they got glassware.
That's true. And if you absolutely positively have to do glasses, and I this is advice I give a lot to my corporate clients for tastings and whatnot, they're doing sales things, and we want to send them all glass with our logo on it. That's cool, especially if they're not a whiskey drinker. But if you're a seasoned whiskey drinker, you don't want a glass with somebody else's logo. Send them monogram glasses. Like, customize it to the individual. If you're going to send them something that's going to be etched, make it personal. If you're a newbie, the brand's logo is fine. But if you're a seasoned drinker and you insist, make it personalized, make it something that they would actually then choose to drink out of because of that personal nature.
And I would also avoid most whiskey gift sets that you see in your major grocery store for a seasoned whiskey drinker. I would avoid most of those overall. There are a couple. Knob does one. Knob Creek does one. Four Roses is doing them with small batch for the last couple of years. But, the Bullet's got a gift set. Nobody cares. There's if you drink Jim Beam, white label, and that's your house bourbon, you can always pick up an extra little something. But, you think, oh, it looks great. Oh, that's a nice gift. They'll like that. Don't do that. Just leave that out. Though that's not what they want. Trust me.
All right. Now, what about the barrel proof hound, right? Guys who I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Folks that want to drink high proof alcohol.
So for the high proof, and they are often the most difficult to buy for because there are not a whole lot of options. And they're going to have most of them underneath their bar. So here again is where you go to store picks. And there are a lot of things coming out now. Like we had several in our single barrel club this year we had a great Rebel cask strength, great Ezra Brooks cask strength, or Old Ezra. But if you aren't able to find those, the one thing for barrel proof folks that I will recommend that people often skip over that we talked about earlier in the episode is barrel proof single barrel Jack Daniels. That stuff to me is absolutely fantastic. And I have said it before, I will say it again. I personally think it is the best readily available barrel proof American whiskey on the market. So and it's one that gets passed over a lot by bourbon drinkers until somebody says, hey, now it's getting less that way. Hope it doesn't get much more less. We won't be able to find this fucking thing either. But
you're not helping.
Yeah, I know I'm not helping, but I give credit where credit's due. It's delicious. I love it. It's one of my desert island bottles, But again, store picks. There'll be some barrel strength store picks, and that's what I would shoot for. Those in the barrel proof Jack. And in terms of avoiding what to avoid biting a barrel proof hound, any whiskey under 100 proof.
Well, that goes without saying, right? Because it's not barrel. Well, it could be, but it's likely not barrel proof, right? So if they like the high proof, don't give them low proof. It's just not the same. And I would say, I agree with your comment on the Jack. I think it's unique, and I think even people who traditionally don't like Jack would appreciate the bottle. And obviously store picks, a lot of those are going to be barrel strength, so those are good options as well. And I would also explore it, depending once again on your budget, right? Maybe you buy them a membership in a single barrel club. It could be Bourbon and Banter's, it could be someone else's, and give them access, right? They still have to buy bottles, but you're giving them access to get on that list and have something like that. That's kind of an advance purchase gift, right? To find something like that. But that was something that would really make a barrel proof lover, you would probably get gift of the year, getting them access to something like that as well. And then I think also this takes a little bit more work, but if you live in a state that has some good craft distilleries, some barrel proof stuff from craft distilleries can be some hidden gems. You have to do a little bit of work, so it's a little more dicey, but getting some of their barrel proof releases, which are only sold in gift shops, like if you're going to travel into another state, buy the barrel proof versions because they tend to hold up a little bit better than some of the lower proof variations that come from some craft distilleries. So that's something else I would check out. And one specifically, just because we visited them recently with some of the stuff out at KO Distilling, right? They had some barrel strength. The source stuff that they just released it. They actually age in different barrels. Their wheat whiskey, not a bourbon, but still a great whiskey at barrel strength. Fabulous stuff. So I would also kind of look at that as well and use those as an option.
And, you mentioned in craft distilleries, if you go a craft route, Pops is right, be very careful, do the work, because in terms of a seasoned drinker and a barrel proof drinker, if you buy them a craft distillery bottle without doing the work, it's going to sit in the back of their bar until they give it to somebody else. So don't be that person. You're going to go craft, do the homework, and make sure you know what you're getting.
That's right. All right, so let's run this out with, what about the person who doesn't really drink whiskey neat or straight on the rocks? They're more of a cocktail lover. What are the must-buys and the avoids for a cocktail lover when it comes to bourbon and whiskey cocktails?
Well, cocktail lovers, I would think, and I am not a cocktail drinker at all. My cocktails consist of bourbon and air. That's it. So that's my cocktail. But bitters, I mean, there's all sorts of specialty bitters, and we've got some great recommendations because we have some great cocktail folks on staff with Bourbon and Banter, as well as, I actually have bought several jars of Luxardo cherries over the years. My mother actually loves the Luxardo cherries, but she's not a cocktail drinker. She just eats the cherries and puts them in wine. Doesn't do anything with whiskey. I've tried.
They're really good on vanilla ice cream. I'm just saying.
It's not happening. But yeah, you get bitters, Luxardo cherries, depending upon the individual and how much glassware they have, nice glassware for cocktails that are specific like that. There are also other there's flavored rim dusts and things like that. I mean, there's all kinds of, if you find a really nice cocktail shop, don't go into Total Wine and look for whatever the hell's on it. But if you find like a nice local, we've got a great local cocktail shop where Pops and I are, that has got a lot of wonderful accessories. Don't buy a fucking water pipette made of glass. Bullshit. That's not what I'm talking about here. Bitters, Luxardo cherries, things like that, and additional cocktail ingredients that might be a really expensive ingredient, like a Luxardo liqueur or something like that might be, a little bit higher end, but that could be a component for cocktails. All those varying components. Some of these things now have got 6-7 different ingredients in it. It can be an expensive cocktail to make. So, not necessarily the core alcohol for the cocktail, but all the stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, and I'll build on this a little bit. Things like different vermouths, right? So a lot of people will, people who don't make cocktails very often will buy the cheapest vermouth they can find, but there's a lot of really great elevated vermouths that you can buy in the market. I just got to go and second his thing on the Luxardo cherries. I don't care what anybody says. There are no better. You can argue all you want. They are the best. They are expensive. So just pay up and buy some. I mean, if somebody delivered, what was the size you said you could buy, the big size?
So there's a 5-pound can of them that is like $60 or $70.
I was like, if anybody wants to get in good with me or Bob, send that our way. Would be all over that, because they're not only great in cocktails. Put them in a little ice cream. You can eat them straight if you really want. They're really good stuff.
What would happen if you made a pie out of those cherries?
Diabetes would happen. That's what would happen. That's what would happen. You can go to bourbonbanter.com and type in Ultimate Guide to the Old Fashioned Cocktail. Our cocktail editor, Erin Petrie, put this together, and she goes into the history, but she talks about all the different ways you can customize. So there's a lot of great ideas around simple syrups, bitters, shrubs, tonics. There's a lot of really stuff you can give in terms of ingredients, but if that's too intimidating, once again, quality bar gear is another great build here, right? So as you said, if they don't have glasses, you can give them glassware. Stick with the classic old-fashioned glass, right? Those are good. Give them, shakers, strainers, barware are always nice things as well. But, for me, if somebody knew I was into cocktails and they showed up at my house with like some really nice, high-quality ice, I know that sounds weird, but like some cocktail ice. Every town's got someone that makes ice for bars, right? And somebody showed up and said, here, I've got some really nice ice for you to make with cocktails. That'd be a truly unique gift as well. And, it's got a short shelf life, but man, that would really be like, holy shit, you really get me. So those are things you can look at as well. But check out that guide that we have on the website, and you're going to get a lot of really good ideas from strainers and bar spoons and mixing glasses to the different ingredients that you can use. Will go a long way in helping you buy for the cocktail lover.
And in terms of what not to buy the cocktail lover, do not buy the pre-bottled cocktails that you're seeing that, they look so cute when you're going in the store. It says it's Knob Creek cocktail. Sure, they're like Knob Creek. Let's do that. No, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
And don't buy a Cocktail Lover, the cocktail machine from Keurig either. Right? A Cocktail Lover wants to make their own drinks, and they don't need little pods to do the work for them. So keep that in mind as well. So hopefully this will help you a little bit as you navigate the season. Once again, we're always here to help you, so you can drop us an email at podcast@bourbonbanter.com. We'll be glad to let you know if you're on the right track or not. There's always a lot of ideas out there. And once again, if you are looking for something and you don't really know what you want to give them, self-promotion plug here for Bourbon Banter, but go to our website, shop.bourbonbanter.com. We've got some cool glassware, some things of that nature. You can give them a gift certificate, or even reach out to us and you could give them a gift certificate for a virtual bourbon tasting. Happy to do that as well, if that's something that will help you out this holiday season. So that's going to call it the day for Bourbon Bullshit, but drop us a note if you have an idea or something you would like to cover it, and we'll take care of it in the next episode. All right, folks, thank you so much for hanging out with us for the 20th episode of the Bourbon and Banter podcast. Bob and I appreciate you tuning in and giving us your whiskey-laden attention. As always, if you have something you would like us to investigate, to cover, or to break news to the world, email us at podcast@bourbonbanter.com, and we will get all over it. And if you want to become part of our Slack community, drop us a line as well, and we'll steer you in the right direction. But thank you so much for your time, your attention, and most importantly, your livers. And remember, folks, if you're going to drink curious.
Well, what's your preference?
Bourbon, if you got it.
Bourbon from Kentucky.
I should certainly fucking hope so.